And then going just back to the security thing, you know that a lot of bot attacks and DDoS attacks, they tend to happen on holidays and cyber attacks. Why do you think they happen on holidays?
Most people are not working.
Because no one's working, no one's paying attention, right?
Yeah.
And you know what's horrible feeling when it's 4th of July and you're
trying to be at the barbecue
and then your phone's ringing. It's like, we're under attack.
Jeez.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's 24/7, 365, especially holidays. You know?
Welcome to Modern Marketing Messages, the leading podcast discussing the latest and greatest in both online and offline marketing tactics, strategies, and trends. I'm your host, Taylor Karg, marketing content writer at AmericanEagle.com. Today, we're going to talk about managed services, an increasingly popular solution for companies looking to streamline their IT needs and focus on growth. But what exactly does managed services mean, and how can they help businesses unlock new potential? To answer these questions and many more, we have here with us Paul Kocan, Vice President of Managed Hosting at AmericanEagle.com. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And thanks for pronouncing my last name so perfectly. A lot of people think it's Kocan.
Before I asked you, I was so nervous and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get it right. So I'm glad I could.
It's counterintuitive when you look at it. It's Kocan and you nailed it. So good job. We're already off to a good start, I guess.
Love it. So can you start a little bit by explaining a little bit about yourself, how you know your career, and how you got to AmericanEagle.com?
Sure. Yeah. I was born in a small town.
Yeah.
Which is true. I was born in Murfreesboro, Illinois, which is about the smallest town you can imagine, down by SIU. Anyway, but no, just So I got my career started in the networking world, in networking for airline industries for United Airlines. And then with Y2K, there was a huge IT boom, and I moved into more of a consulting role for carriers. Sprint was one of the companies at the time, Sprint Enterprise Network Services, and through there and I spent a lot of my time at financial institutions, both commercial and retail, such as E-Trade, a lot of broker dealers and trading firms. My focus has grown mostly on the infrastructure and operation side. So for those who don't know what infrastructure means, because it can mean roads and bridges, but in technology, you're talking about compute, like servers, you're talking about networking, storage, cybersecurity, and then there's a overlay of technical practices that go over that to do that correctly. So it's not just about the technology, but it's about the processes and the people and the tooling that used to run and manage large technology solutions at scale. So I've focused the last 20-something years of my career on learning the ins and out of that. And the most important trends that I think that came out over the last 5-10 years is really allowing the IT operations work to cooperate and to enable the innovation side. Usually operations tends to be a barrier to innovation because change equals instability. It's just the nature of the beast. So the operations tends to focus on, don't change anything because everything's working right now and I don't want anything to break. And the innovation side, the feature side, the revenue side is often trying to add additional value for their customers. So they want more change, and there can be, it's what we call the core chronic conflict between, let's say, product development and IT operations. Is that you need change to make more value. Change disrupts service. How do you do that? Well, so there's a set of technical practices and cultural practices really that allow you to really have a lot of the best of both worlds. So that's what I've been focusing on in my career. That's what I'm, hoping to bring to American Eagle. And that's what I'm here now. So real excited to be here. What I think about American Eagle, what I notice is the veteran staff. There's not a revolving door of technology staff like you'll see in a lot of other companies who are kind of chasing. There's people who've been doing this and they love this company. They're very loyal to it. The focus on doing web development, like internet facing with money that goes in versus just doing internal IT.
Yeah.
That's a lot of security risk, and it takes a lot of specialized skill sets and practices and people who are switched on. So I really am enjoying that piece of it and working with the people and the energy here. So
How did you get into networking in the first place? Like, obviously, as a writer and a marketer, that stuff is way over my head. So I'm like, I'm just curious how you even started or what made you even know what that is.
I'll share my journey into technology.
Yeah.
My father is a biologist.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. So there you go. Right.
Smart.
So that's
runs in the family.
Well, that's one side of the house. My mother, though, is an electrical engineer. She's a PhD at AT&T Bell Laboratories.
So it really runs in your family.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So
Holy
when I was young and I started going to college, I wanted to get into horticulture.
Okay.
And I was taking classes for, nurse classes for growing plants and stuff. And I don't know. It got to the point where I remember just like learning about what the day-to-day of horticulture would be like. I don't know about this. And then I was working at a company and they needed someone to just do some data processing work. And I was sitting behind a computer and I ended up sitting behind the computer, just do data entry, the most simple stuff in the world. I did it for like 8 hours and I was like, I could sit behind a computer.
Wow.
And then I started getting into computers. And then I went to college and I took, courses in networking. And I like that a lot better than programming. The programming courses I didn't like too much. I really like the stuff about, the physics of it, the transmission lines, optical networks. And then when I got my first job out of college at a network operations center for the airlines, they were just doing, the internet was just really coming out. That's how old I am. The internet was just becoming commercially available for everybody. And we started enabling a lot of the airports to use newer technologies. And I really took to it. I could, I noticed that I had this ability to take large complex networks and I could fit them all in my head, how everything talked to each other and work. And then it just kind of took off from there. And then back then, when you get into networking, I got a lot of certifications. I got into the network design pieces of it. The network design pieces, you have to work with all sorts of aspects of the business because everybody needs to communicate to each other and they have to do it through the network, and they have business needs and technology needs that have to be translated and express themselves in some kind of networking. For example, if you are, let's say I'm working for a broker dealer and we have a large hedge fund that we're onboarding, and that hedge fund is doing an arbitrage type strategy and they want to trade through our systems. Well, these are going to be business needs. So you will need connectivity to exchanges, particular exchanges. Those exchanges may be near your customer or they may be on the other side of the world. That customer is going to need lower latency because they're going to be trying to compete with their competitors. So this lower latency means that you have to figure out a way to use technology that's very fast, very low latency technology lines that like telecom lines that are direct, that don't bounce through a bunch of countries, but have, ocean lines or whatever that go as fast as they can. So all I'm trying to demonstrate is that business needs translate into technology, which means that you have to respond to that. So that's how I kind of really got into the operation side. I got promoted and moved to run all of infrastructure, which gave me more responsibility. And then I had to kind of move away from thinking only about the technology itself into technology practices. Mm-hmm. How do you maximize uptime? How do you maximize security? How do you still let the business move and make changes in a safe way that's not too expensive? How do you do strategic sourcing? All that stuff. So, and that kind of landed me into managed services because that's what it is. That's what the game is.
Yeah.
Right? And
just, listening to you talking, like, holy cow, I knew there was a lot that goes into all of this, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what any of this is. So I'm glad, you're here and we're doing this episode so I can understand and, hopefully your listeners too. So let's jump right in and talk about today's topic. What is managed services? Let's start there. Okay. And how do they differ from traditional IT services?
Okay. And, traditional IT is kind of trying to find a word for the way things have always been done.
Yeah.
So let's say traditional, I'll just, for this conversation, define it as like in-house.
Okay.
So I'm a company. I have all sorts of those needs that I said they have to be expressed in technology in some shape, matter, and form. Almost every company, or I'd say every company, needs a website. That's just an example, right?
Yeah.
Other companies need ERP systems, etc. You hire people to run all that stuff. Engineers, operators, architects. You hire them all, and they all, have to architect, design, support, engineer, pay for it. You do that all in-house. Managed services is you take some of those, or all of them, but mostly some of those key resources, and you find a partner, a third party, that to do that, to take that on for you and do it for you, and they manage it for you. So it's the service. They take a service, a technology service, find a partner who you think for whatever reason might do it better than you can, and you partner with them, and you move the service over.
Do you find that a lot of people now are doing it like in-house and finding a partner? They're kind of doing a blend of both, or what does that look like?
I think depending on the size and the complexity of the customer, there will always be a lot of room to do it both, to mix and match services. The trend that I've seen over the last 20 something years is things tend to distribute, you move things out, and then it gets unstable because you lose control. So then you pull everything back in, and then you distribute. When you pull it all back in, it becomes overwhelming. You become ossified, like you can't really move at the level you want.
Okay.
You become frustrated. You become a hostage to your own processes, and then you redistribute it, and then you pull it in. So there's just a cycle.
Okay. Yeah.
In technology of like a Hegelian dialectic or something of services. So
that makes sense. So obviously I don't know a lot, but I know that there are different types of managed services available, like cloud, web hosting, hybrid. Can you talk a little bit about those and what those mean?
Sure. So let's start with like web hosting. So that's American Eagle's bread and butter. We've been doing web hosting as long as I think web hosting has been a thing, for almost 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. Probably one of the first, companies to be doing it, and maybe not the first, but definitely, up there,
yeah.
Right? Long time.
Yeah.
And there's people still here who were doing it, so they know it back and forth. So that's a perfect example of managed service. Like, you're a company, and what do you know about making websites? And what do you know about hosting websites? And it only gets more complicated as the years went on. Web hosting used to be very easy. I mean, there was web hosting before there was, before there were hackers, but every year, you find more and more, reasons to not do your own web hosting. Even when I was at, let's say, some of the trading firms, they're very complex systems, very sophisticated. You'd have to almost make a skill set choice. Do we want to really host our own website, and then that's going to distract us from doing X, Y, and Z, or do we go to an expert and have them host our website for us? Yeah. And we let the marketing team update their own content. That's a perfect example of managed hosting. At American Eagle, we have our own data centers, state of the art, PCI, SOC 2 compliant. And then we have, over those years, created a platform for web hosting that has, the customized tooling, the processes, the people, the monitoring, all the things we need to do it really well and really effectively. For a company to have to recreate all that, why would they? They have better things to spend their money on, So that'd be web. Cloud is, a little bit newer. Cloud's not exactly new, but cloud, and by the way, for those who don't know it, I mean, everybody says cloud, but we're talking about large public cloud is large companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google, as an example, buy data centers all over the world, connect them with high-speed connectivity with networking, fill them with storage, servers, and then they overlay it with custom software to allow companies to just rent little pieces of a data center with all the
Okay.
networking. So you
Yeah.
get like a little portal, and you get like, you can be this way. This is one experience would be, you go and you sign up for Amazon, and it lists all the server. Oh, do I want a server? How big do I want that server? How many core processors? How much RAM? How much storage? Oh, I want some network connectivity. I want internet connectivity. I want a firewall. I want these, and it's a la carte, and you click
You
and
just
you
add
build,
it to,
and you add it, and then for every one of those, you get a bill for
Yeah.
every minute you use it.
Holy cow.
So for every minute you're using that service, you get a bill. Maybe it's 0.01 cents.
Yeah.
Maybe it's $5.
Mhm.
It depends on the service. And then what's great about that is traditional IT, you would have to like call up a company, and then you'd place an order all at one time, everything you need. And then 6 weeks later, it gets delivered.
Yeah.
Then you got to rack it, you got to stack it, and you might not use it all. You might be buying a lot of stuff that you're only using a little bit of.
Mhm.
Where the cloud, it spins up right away. It's virtual. It spins up right away, and you can log in, you can start using it. So it allows a lot of flexibility, but it's nothing magical. It's software on top of traditional IT services.
Yeah.
Really good software on top of traditional IT services in Google's or Amazon's data centers, right? So okay, great. That's a whole set of processes, engineering, architecture. Now you're throwing in a whole completely different costing model than traditional IT has ever. So now you have like cost implications. You have to calculate per minute. You have to know why one service costs more than another, and if you're using the right service. So there's a whole level of complexity. Do you want to do that? Well, some companies absolutely. They'll say we want to do it.
Yeah.
What if you have to use services from different clouds to make your solution work? But if you want to use natural language processing from Azure, but other core services from Amazon. Oh, well, now you have to know two clouds.
Yeah.
You could see the complexity just keeps adding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, well, maybe you have a partner for that. Like we have a particular customer, very large customer. They have almost all they have a hybrid environment. They have a bunch of stuff in their data centers that are their legacy systems. They have another huge amount of workloads in AWS, and then they have certain like services that we're partnering with them in Azure. So instead of training up and hiring a bunch of Azure people, we just do it for them.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just easier for them. So they can focus on what they're good at, what they invested in, and we take on that. So that'd be like cloud hosting. Another thing with cloud hosting I think is interesting is this idea of cloud operations. So so one of the propositions that a lot of companies went through is, well, once you move to the cloud, you don't need all these data centers, you don't need all these people, you don't need all these things. You could really shrink your operational support because it's all as a service from the cloud provider. Okay, so they do that. How do you do 24/7 support when you had 12 people and you just reduce it to 3?
Yeah. That's a
So
great
how
point.
but how are you going to? Oh well, you use managed services
Yeah.
to do your 24/7 365
Mm.
support,
Mhm.
right? And it costs a fraction of hiring 12 people.
Yeah.
So what do we say? And then there'd be like security managed services. Like they'd be like a lot of companies. They do a lot of stuff very complicated, but they don't they don't know where to fit certain types of services like web application firewalls and CDNs and their DNS, which is their name services like secure DNS and protective DNS and botnet protection, all these security services. It's like, well, do you really want to build out a security team that knows all this and manages it? Or do you go to a third party and have them just run it for you and set you all up?
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So those would be examples of, did I hit them all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
good.
I mean, hybrid also is one, but I think like with
Yeah,
everything
hy-
you talked about,
Right. Hybrid would be,
solution.
hybrid is,
Yeah.
you have some of your services that are traditional, other services are the cloud, and you kind of, you tie those together with processes that work in both places. It's like we're a hybrid. American Eagle's got services in the cloud. We have our data center,
Right.
and then we
yeah.
have a set of skilled resources, tooling, et cetera, that can manage both and, appropriately.
So why do you think managed services are becoming, increasingly popular for businesses, small and large?
I think it's because of the cost again that we're saying. Do you want to hire a staff do you want to have to hire people that know all that different technology? It's about the flexibility, right? Internal IT, when you don't have that staff, or sometimes when you have a staff that doesn't want to, they don't know how to grow into these other and take advantage of other technologies, or they're not ready yet.
Yeah.
It can prevent companies from innovating and from growing. So there's like a scalability and a flexibility angle for it. So it just gives a company, and then there's the focus side. So sometimes when you do that, you end up it doesn't always go super smooth, especially in the beginning, and you end up taking your most strategic people at a company, and they're focused on keeping the lights on instead of growing your business. So it can be very distracting doing
Mhm.
operation. The classic example would be you have a bunch of projects in play with your technology staff. You have an outage the night before, and your team's up all night, and then no one shows up to the next meeting because they do, and they can't. They're still
Zombie,
mopping up,
yeah.
or they're still dealing with the outage.
Yeah.
They're still, well, we can't work on this right now because our customers are still done.
Yeah.
That type of thing. You want to kind of avoid that by allowing your real critical staff that you need to focus on strategy, not let them be bogged down too much by the day-to-day operations and break fix.
You mentioned cost a little bit. So does it vary, or do you think, is there like a big cost discrepancy between doing it in-house or, hiring somebody like AmericanEagle.com, or doing like a mix of both?
I think the cost is real complicated
I feel like everything is complicated
well,
about this.
it could be very cost effective and simple, or it could be extremely expensive. And especially, and I hate to say, I've used a lot of managed services, or walked into companies and used managed services, especially with long contract times where you kind of feel like a prisoner. They're very expensive. They're not responsive. They have so many legalese clauses in their agreement that
Mm,
you can't get them to do anything as your business changed. That can be very expensive,
yeah.
right? Some people call that the slumlord managed services, right? Like you're just stuck there and you
Yeah,
can't.
that sounds
Yeah. Uh, um,
pretty terrible.
and people who know the business know, they right now they're probably thinking of certain companies that
Companies,
provide,
yeah.
you know, um, what we're definitely trying to differentiate ourselves, and I think 100% successful so far, is not being like that, to being,
Yeah.
really helping customers feel like, at ease, that we'll bring in that expertise, we'll bring in that partnership that we have, a 25-year track record for. We'll bring in the flexibility, um, and it'll be reasonable cost.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
for the cloud hosting, cloud managed services, it's usually a fraction of your cloud spend, like a fraction of it is goes to the management of it that you don't have to do yourself. So you're
Yeah.
spending all this money with AWS,
So
and then
cloud is more, you're saying?
can be very
Okay.
expensive. It
Yeah.
depends how it's done, though. I
Yeah.
mean, I can give an example. A company that I'll just say that I know well,
Mhm.
um, firsthand experience, move workloads. These were high end workloads, very performant systems, from their data center into a particular cloud. I won't say which one, doesn't matter. And some of those workloads went from costing about $1 million a year to $5 million a year in the cloud. When they
Yeah,
didn't,
that's
that was
quite a
not
lot.
part of their business case. They did not expect that to do it. Just that the way the cloud performed wasn't fast enough for the way their apps were designed. They had traditional apps that were cloud native, so it can be extremely expensive.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you can design applications to use things called like functions and serverless, and it can just really only you only get charged on a transaction basis,
Mm.
and you can easily like flex up, and when you have a big surge, it just auto scales out, and you're only paying for the cost during that surge, and then it shrinks back down. So it could be extremely cost effective too. So it's a real complicated,
Yeah.
and that's kind of why you need someone to partner with and help you figure that out. Not every workload is right for the cloud.
Yeah.
That's why you have hybrid. That's why a lot of companies right now, it's a huge trend. I think the number was, I was recent, I think it's 70% of customers who've moved workloads to the cloud are now considering moving workloads back some of their workloads
Yeah.
back into on premises for cost
Interesting.
and security and
Yeah.
other reasons. So
Wow.
it's, it should be looked at as another item on the menu of meeting business needs, not like it's the only way to go. For
Yeah.
some companies, it is. There's other companies I know they're 100% cloud. They acquire a bunch of other companies.
Okay.
They do a lot of acquisitions,
Yeah.
and they don't want to have to wait for stuff. That's no way. They just take everybody, take their assets, suck the book into the cloud, into their systems, and keep moving. And it works really good for them. So it really depends on the business model of the company.
Yeah, it feels very nuanced to, like you said, the business and
Right.
the resources that they have and what they need.
Exactly. Right.
So you shared a little bit about this already with like saying flexibility and scalability, but what are some other benefits of, adopting managed services?
Well, I do think one of the having the confidence that you're doing it right and getting the feedback that shows your spend and having another expert pair of eyes looking at it and giving you like high quality um, consulting as part of your agreement where you don't have to be concerned about that. You get a dashboard basically or a report that's, red, amber, green based on performance, security, costs, etc. I think that's a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
And then, that partnership of being able to say, okay, well, here's where we're going to be next year. What do we need to do to get there? That I think that road mapping and stuff is really valuable as well. So what did I say? Flexibility, scalability, security.
Yeah.
Security is a big one. Here's another thing I read recently. Medium-sized businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, 60% of them that have experienced some sort of cybersecurity breach,
Wow.
60% of them go out of business within 6 months.
That's insane.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So how often does your average small to medium-sized business deal with a cybersecurity event? Hopefully never. But
if they do.
Right. But when you have a partner who's been through it, is keeping up to date and getting certified and, with the regulations and the compliance of like SOC 1 and PCI, et cetera, they stay on their toes and everybody gets, it happens to everybody, but eventually, but that can really, that's a really good way to protect yourself. It's not necessarily you can externalize all that risk, but it helps you manage it, helps you mitigate it. It helps you get cyber insurance because you're following the rules, you're following a good framework. So your cybersecurity insurance could be a lot less,
You said this earlier and I thought it was a great like value proposition, especially for a company like AmericanEagle.com, but the like 24/7, 365 coverage too. And I think, we try to use that a lot in our marketing messaging too.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then going just back to the security thing, that a lot of bot attacks and DDoS attacks, they tend to happen on holidays and cyber attacks. Why do you think they happen on holidays?
Most people are not working.
Because no one's working. No one's paid attention, right?
Yeah.
And it's horrible feeling when it's 4th of July and you're
trying to be at the barbecue
and then your phone's ringing. It's like, we're under attack.
Jeez.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's 24/7, 365, especially holidays,
Can you share an example of a company that has seen, significant growth or just operational improvements due to, working with managed services or even just working with us? You don't have to name the client, but.
Yeah, well, let me give you a couple anecdotal examples. So one company, they partnered with us and we looked at their environment and we saw some of their technology choices, which were okay. We gave them a report and said, hey, if you swap these out, you could have kind of better, let's say, security and actually save money. And they were like, oh, well, we'll consider that. And then an event happened and they're like, okay, we want to do that right now because their solution wasn't working. And we were ready to go and we swapped it out, fast. Like we switched service over. And then their cloud spend bill ended up going down more than their cost for managed services.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So that's like an example.
Yeah.
Other examples is like a company that they moved all this workload into the cloud. And then one of the people who made that decision and were running it left the company.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is people who make decent amount of money, right? High-end tech staff. And we partnered with them. We just took over it all. And then they didn't have to hire anybody and the services cost a fraction of a salary.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we did our audits and everything, and there was a lot of issues, performance issues, security issues, stuff like backups not working right, failing. Like you thought you had backups, so you
Guess what?
click
You
the button,
don't. Yeah.
but they're not. And that was all became visible to them, so they got to see it, which was a little bit overwhelming. But then we just kind of worked through it month after month. Like, okay, this might cost a little bit more, but you have to pay for this or this. And then they slowly saw their this report, not slowly, but over time go from red and amber to green.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're paying less than we've ever paid for supporting this.
And performing better.
And I have more visibility than I've ever had into what's going on. And I'm confident because you're going through it with a fine tooth comb every month,
and working with us to remedy all of these issues.
And my boss is happy and everybody and the company's happy. We know our security, is better. We know the performance is better. We're not getting alerts. We're not getting called in the middle of the night. There's no more, site going down stuff. So, those would be, and there's more than that.
Yeah.
Those, another one was just that other example I was giving you where they had this workload, they put it in Azure, they just partnered with us and we really worked with them to customize, integrating into their operating model, like getting onto their internal messaging system and getting access to their ticketing systems. So we're tied into their command centers. It's a larger company. So when there's, we're doing first response on this set of services, not all the other ones, and their central operations teams, we're just another name in there where they're paging us out and we're on the calls and we're supporting their systems. It just allowed them, that group who leveraged us, they're focusing on doing development work and all the stuff that they're really good at. And the whole ops work is just, they don't have to worry about it. So,
yeah. Well, good for you guys. Have you found that there are some common challenges that maybe like customers or prospects or like apprehensiveness from them as to why they would, use a company for managed services?
Yeah. A lot of the barriers have to do with fear of letting go control.
Control, yeah.
Right.
I think that goes for a lot of.
One of those fears, there's two. There's one set of fears, which is like, this is my job. I don't want to lose my job. I'm really important. They kind of make their identity about keeping their stuff up and working when that's, you could do that. I get it. I don't know what to say to that, but it's like, you're a smart person. You should be focusing on the strategy side then. Cause this stuff is, it's hard to take. It's easy for us to do it because we have really senior staff who's working on a lot of different customers, really complex operational issues. So it's not just on one customer's.
Yeah.
So if you had to hire someone just to worry about your one complex system, a lot of times they'd be sitting around waiting for it to break.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Where when you have, as many customers as we have, someone's always breaking somewhere. So so we have senior staff who can just, go through and they're on the spot. Mm-hmm. So that's one. So like, I don't want to lose you should be, to them, I would say focus on, making it better, getting rid of your technical debt, moving faster for your business. The second, related fear to that is really conscientious people who don't want to have other people come in and manage their stuff because there's so many things they want to fix. It's like what I call, it's like cleaning the house before the maid comes.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, you're like, oh, I don't want her. Oh, this is too messy.
I don't want her to judge me.
I don't want to do this to anybody to make this their problem. Let me fix it all. Then when it's all clean and neat, then I'll hand it over to you. No, don't just, I mean, maybe there's some of that. Sometimes there's a level of standard. We can't take over operational management of something until it meets a particular level. We'll audit it and we're like, look at, we can't.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But here's a roadmap of how we get there. Right. And then we help with that roadmap and we go. So I think those were some barriers. Cost. People, when nothing's broken, they'd rather not pay the money. And then they go down and they have a huge outage and they're like, why? We lost way more money during the outage than we would have if we just spent this. So those are some barriers.
That makes sense. Have you ever encountered any like misconceptions about managed services from, prospects or clients, and they think like it's one thing, or that, a third party company does more than they expect, or I don't know. I'm just trying to put myself in the, prospect's shoes.
Yeah. I mean, there are. So like one is some of the misconceptions is that they think it's just way too expensive. And then when they see how much it costs, it's not as much as they thought.
Yeah.
Two, I think there's sometimes a misconception, like if they develop their own app and they have us manage the infrastructure that runs that, we can solve bad coding problems that we didn't design in code, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's I think a big misconception. If you have legacy old apps, we can keep the infrastructure and stuff and we can help, but it's not like you can't just turn a key and just have like the apps all of a sudden start performing ready, when they're written 20 years ago and haven't
been updated.
They've been on a version of whatever platform that's 10 years old and they have all this, never had a hot fix applied, et cetera. We can't sell this. So there'd be some misconceptions, I think.
Yeah, I got you. So I have one more question for you today, and that is just, what future trends are there in managed services, and how is AmericanEagle.com prepared to, meet these trends, or, work with customers to adapt to these trends?
What I see as the most likely trend out there that we're preparing to help with is that you have now, so now you have these cloud providers that used to be like kind of the big three, but on top of those cloud providers, you're having other providers. They're using the cloud providers and they're making all sorts of platforms and software as a service, and they're components and services that make up an overall app. You'd have like, let's say an e-commerce site or something, and it's pulling reports over here and it's going over to this other application from another company over here. And, you got a headless CMS over here and the front ends in another provider. So now you have all these different third parties that make up one application for your customer.
Yeah.
Right. And any one of those can break. And how do you know which one's broken? How do you manage all that complexity? So I think this multi-vendor managed services is what we're preparing for.
Okay.
Especially around headless CMS and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially as that becomes a lot more prominent too.
Right.
That makes sense. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. That was all the questions I had. I learned a lot about managed services and just how much nuance is in everything, and have a lot more to learn, but I think this was a great start. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So let me know if you ever want me back on.
And for anyone looking for more information, we will put a link to our website landing page that shows AmericanEagle.com's managed cloud services in the show notes.
Yeah. And I would just say also, if you want to know more, we have, cloud assessments, cloud readiness assessments. We have audits we can help you with. And if you just reach out, we can always have a conversation. So
yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of resources. So check them out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Modern Marketing Messages. Check out below for more information about this episode and AmericanEagle.com's digital marketing services. This podcast is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. I'm Taylor Karg, and I'll be back with another Modern Marketing Message.